on the screen is, you can see from the USGS research vessel Hyde. But I like this photo because in the background you might not recognize that, but that's a close-up shot of the sleeping giant in Ontario, kind of showing some of the cooperative sort of work that happens across the lake between our nations. So this workshop is being held as part of the lakewide management process. And I'm going to explain what that is and some related terms from that process, which is the Lakewide Action and Management Plan, or the LAMP, and the Lake Superior Partnership, because you'll probably be hearing some of those terms over the next couple of days. Lakewide management is called for under the Canada-US Water Quality Agreement that Lee talked about a little bit earlier, and that's an agreement to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the waters of the Great Lakes. With that origin back to 1972, it has contributed to a lot of accomplishments in restoring the Great Lakes for the past 45 years. And the photo on the screen is from the last amendment or update, which took place in 2012. The 2012 Water Quality Agreement includes 10 annexes, which are really just chapters of content behind the agreement that help guide the efforts that are needed. The Lakewide Management Annex asks us to look at each of the Great Lakes issues from a lake-by-lake perspective, recognizing that each of the Great Lakes is unique. So lakewide management itself is really a process. It's an ongoing process that provides answers to how the ecosystem is doing, what is stressing the ecosystem, and what additional science and action is necessary. That's a really important role of lakewide management. What additional science and action is necessary? In addition to answering those questions, while we're together answering those questions, we take the opportunity to coordinate wherever we can in terms of the actions that we are going to be taking and tracking our progress and challenges from a lakewide perspective. So while lakewide management is a process, the lake partnerships are the people, or more specifically, it's an umbrella term that we made up, so we don't have to explain that there's 30 different organizations and government agencies participating in the Lake Superior Partnership. So raise your hand today here if you are a member of the Lake Superior Partnership working group with me. So you can see quite a few of us are here today, and they play that really important role of answering those questions and coordinating amongst the different government agencies. And in turn, these government agencies of the partnership work really closely with academia, NGOs, and businesses and other communities in terms of implementing our work. The photo on the screen is from a past meeting of the Lake Superior Partnership Working Group. And I included this one because the chair in the middle is the empty voice of Liz LaPlante, who couldn't come due to a travel restriction. So we're all aware that travel restrictions do occur to all of us at some time, and I know some of our provincial colleagues that couldn't make it here today are listening on the phone and a big part of this partnership. So I also don't want to forget about my provincial colleagues. So we have the process, we have the people, and then the LAMP, or the Lakewide Action and Management Plan. So if you're hearing LAMP, Lakewide Action and Management Plan, it's a document. It's the document that includes the answers to our questions about how the lake is doing, what is stressing the lake, and what additional actions are necessary. And you can see maybe the date on that plan. It's a 5-year plan coming to conclusion at the end of this calendar year. So today's workshop is feeding in to the next plan. So you are feeding in to the next Lakewide Action and Management Plan. So our shared goal is to restore and protect the Great Lakes. That's why we're all together and why so many agencies are together. We operate under that shared objective. And so now I could share what the LAMP says about the state of the lake, but actually I can give you some of what the next LAMP will probably be saying about the state of the lake, because the 2019 State of the Great Lakes report which includes over 40 sub-indicators, is very close to being released, and the following slides I'm going to share incorporate some of that information, and they were shared a few weeks ago in Milwaukee at the Great Lakes Public Forum. So overall, as assessed by the 2019 State of the Great Lakes Indicator Suite, Lake Superior's ecosystem is in good condition, and the trend is unchanging. So there's a couple of pie charts at the bottom. That's a breakdown of the status and trends for the sub-indicators that go into that overall assessment. And green in the status represents good sub-indicators, yellow represents fair, and red represents poor. You can see more sub-indicators were assessed as good, which is why we're resulting in an overall good assessment. But it is worth noting that there are many sub-indicators that are fair on Lake Superior, and a smaller number that are poor. In terms of trend, which is on the right-hand side, the diamond represents an unchanging trend. The arrow to the right represents an improving trend. The arrow to the left is a decreasing or deteriorating trend. So you can see the majority of sub-indicators are showing the diamond, which is a trend of unchanging, and why the overall assessment comes out from this really broad perspective as good and unchanging. So I can drop down a little bit to look at what's being said about Lake Superior related to the different general objectives of the Water Quality Agreement. So Lake Superior continues to be a good source of high-quality drinking water and has beaches and nearshore areas that continue to provide good opportunities for recreational use. The photo on the screen is probably on a clear day somewhere in Wisconsin, just over there, maybe when the water levels were a little bit lower. Because of the good conditions, this isn't a big focus for the LAMP in terms of activities, but many projects are being taken to help maintain the good beach quality and nearshore water quality. So for example, in the city of Thunder Bay, with funding from the province of Ontario, Superior environmental programs have been organizing beach cleanups and running storm drain education programs and contributing to green infrastructure projects. And I know through the partnership and through the LAMP, those sort of activities and work is happening in many places all around the lake towards our shared goal on water quality in the nearshore areas. Toxic chemicals are generally lower in Lake Superior compared to the other Great Lakes and continue to decline, but we are really far from pristine, and there are fish consumption advisories continue to be in effect. A special effort called the Zero Discharge Demonstration Program has been made in the Lake Superior Basin to track and eliminate emission and discharges of some toxic contaminants. So for example, mercury emissions and discharges have been reduced by 82% compared to the 1990 levels. And making further reductions continues to be a priority in the LAMP. So for example, in the last month or two, the U.S. Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding was made available to investigate the suspected methylation and transport of mercury from a vast human-ditched peatland landscape here in Minnesota. And if they confirm that that human-made pathway is transporting mercury into the waters and fish, then future actions could be to close that pathway. And I know there's interest in those results beyond just that study area. Nutrients and algae are a very hot topic for the Great Lakes and the focus of a lot of management attention, especially in Lake Erie. So there's regularly questions come up about this issue and what's the issue like on Lake Superior. So the response is that the nutrient concentrations in Lake Superior are similar to historic values, indicating acceptable ecosystem conditions. Harmful algal blooms and nuisance algae are generally not a concern in the lake. However, some short-lived non-toxic blooms of cyanobacteria occur in the area between the Duluth Harbor and Apostle Islands. As you can see for yourself from a photo, that's a Lake Superior photo on the screen. The occurrences of these short-lived algal blooms is new to the Lake Superior management community, and their appearance may be related to a priority issue in the Lake Superior land, climate change. So it's a good opportunity for people's interest in this issue to talk about introduced climate change. The algae blooms in recent years have followed extreme rain events and flooding, pushing huge amounts of sediment from the land into the lake. And I know this area in particular where these blooms are occurring has seen more extreme rain events in recent years. This is getting combined with warm surface water temperatures, and the long-term data does show that the surface waters are warming. So the lake is changing in these regards. What has also changed is the work of the lake partnership agencies in doing more to support the development of climate adaptation plans around the lake. So for example, the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission has recently released a tribal climate adaptation menu to help empower other governments and landowners and NGOs to incorporate Anishinaabe perspectives into climate adaptation planning. Overall, the Lake Superior Basin supports many habitats, including coastal wetlands, which are in good condition and support native species. However, the loss of habitat connectivity between the tributaries in the lake is impacting some native fish species, such as lake sturgeon. Lake trout are in good condition. They are supported by a stable and diverse prey fish population. The lower food web is healthy, with a small shrimp-like species of diapria still at good levels. Lake Superior is the only lake that can provide positive messages about the lower food web and some aspects of their habitats and species. Many projects are underway to help restore and, more importantly, protect Lake Superior's high-quality habitats and species. The photo on the screen, for example, is from a project by Pays Plat First Nation on the north side of the lake. They've been working to protect their cultural connections to Lake Superior through plantings of native species, taking care of their shoreline, undertaking a baseline ecological inventory, and they've constructed more habitat-friendly elevated viewing platforms and floating boardwalks in the area. Finally, invasive species, particular sea lamprey, are still causing harm to predatory fish, such as lake trout. Another species of current priority for Lake Superior and in the LAMP is the invasive Phragmites plant. This is a familiar invasive plant to many in the lower lakes where wetlands have been completely overtaken. But it might not be too late for Lake Superior. The photo on the top is from the Lake Superior National Marine Conservation Area in Canada, which is monitoring for Phragmites closely with an aim to prevent the invasive plant from establishing in those boundaries. Those boundaries cover 1/8 of the entire Lake Superior. On the south shore in Wisconsin, like the photo on the bottom, there are many targeted projects to eliminate these stands. So in conclusion from the LAMP, the Lake Superior is in good condition, but there are many stressors. There's actions have been taken to restore and protect the lake, all from many different agencies and other partners, and there's much more work to be done. I'm going to transition here to Liz to tell you a little bit more about the science process. So again, the final list of science and monitoring priorities is the list that ultimately gets approved by the Lake Superior Partnership Management Committee by the end of 2019. And it's that list that gets sent to the science leads under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. They inform the next CSMI, Water Science and Monitoring Initiative field year, and they also get included in the next 5-year LAMP. The management committee is made up of senior managers and executives from nearly 30 government agencies as part of the Lake Superior Partnership. They're my managers and executives. It's co-chaired by US EPA and Environment and Climate Change Canada. And with whatever recommended list is put forward to them, we kind of already have a sense of what sort of questions they'll be asking in terms of part of the approval process. One is, they often ask, why is this list of priorities so long? So for example, they will not be asked to approve this workshop's report, but rather a list of priorities which this workshop is informing. The longer the list we provide, the more questions they start having about what really is and isn't a priority for the lake. Two, they ask what results are anticipated, because they really want to make sure that the priorities that we propose are after clearly defined results, and that the results are achievable. Third, they often ask they always ask how we're going to use the results. They want to make sure that the results that come out from our science and monitoring are helping us and helping them, helping all of us inform our decisions on what actions are necessary to further restore and protect the lakes. We also need to recognize that some management committee members of our agencies and the co-chairs in particular oversee many of the different Great Lakes. So they're actually getting a recommended list of science and monitoring priorities every year. So it might be useful to see what they've been hearing from the other 4 lakes recently. So first of all, overall, they already know that there is a nearshore framework assessment, which is a Great Lakes-wide priority under the lake-wide management of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. So they're already anticipating to see the results of these nearshore assessments. In the US, that's being conducted through a national coastal condition assessment by 2020, that's the commitment. In Canada, we are also doing nearshore assessments to be completed by 2022. So that effort is underway. You can see some of the results in the draft upcoming Lake Erie Lakewide Action Management Plan, which will be released for public review in the coming weeks and months. And the results of these assessments will be incorporated into future LAMPs as they become available. The other lakes have been organizing their priorities under issue themes, generally 4 to 6 issue themes. But under these themes, of course, there's a lot more detail on specific research and monitoring questions and rationale. So even under 4 themes, the lists start getting longer if you really dive into them, probably 15 to 20 kind of research type questions under these themes in total. But you can see, if you take a look, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, that's what they stand for. And here are the priority themes for the other lakes. So you can see from the other lakes, Management Committee continues to see questions and priorities related to different issues in the different lakes around the contaminants issue. They're hearing priorities about nutrients from each of the lakes, either in terms of understanding concentrations or loadings, or the impacts of nutrients. The lower food web status is being raised as a priority from three of the other 4 lakes. But you can also see that there's been room and acceptance of a variety of different priorities from the different lakes, kind of recognizing that each lake management community may be raising some unique priorities. So today we're discussing Lake Superior priorities. And in addition to this workshop, there is an open public opportunity for folks to feed into what they believe priorities are and to share their advice. We also know that there are folks listening quietly online. They have access to providing input today through this process. In fact, this will be open until July 25th. People feeding into this, this questionnaire, and we'll be including those results in the workshop report. But just to give you a couple cents of what others have been saying prior to the workshop, I'll just share a couple of kind of high-level results. Again, this is going to be a display of input. This is not any sort of decision that's happening. One question that was put out in that survey was what remains of those 14 priorities that Liz showed earlier remains of highest importance. And I think the main message here, you don't have to look at all the details here, but the main message is, even with the results that we've received so far, there's many different opinions on what the single top priority is. Wouldn't it be amazing if that just showed one thing, everyone agrees? But it's a wide variety of responses on what's the top priority. A few more votes were given to the monitoring of the lower food web trophic program. But again, these are just showing the results of input to date, and these are not decisions. In terms of lowest continuing important, again, we can see the diversity in terms of opinion. So even the top priority from the last slide does show up as the lowest importance. And there, again, the colors are probably hard to match here for you, but again, the idea is that there's a lot of variety in terms of what is the lowest. That 18.8%, again, there's not a lot of people feeding into this, but if the fish biologists could close their ears for a second, that was support for fish rehab plans. Another question we asked was about, looking about new questions. What new issues should we be addressing? And again, a lot of different and good advice is already coming through that online survey. What's already risen to the top are a variety of questions and interest and issues regarding the effects of climate change. So again, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today. I think we're well positioned to get a better understanding of our information gaps to start identifying potential science and monitoring priorities for Lake Superior moving forward. And hopefully we all have an opportunity to identify some ways to better cooperate on our shared efforts to restore and protect the lake. Thank you. So the question was, is there interest and activity in terms of making some priorities, such as the Lake Sturgeon Index Survey, a more consistent priority and approach across the Great Lakes where applicable? And I think the answer is yes. In terms of my experience, actually, a lot of things like the Lake Sturgeon Survey and the lower trophic food web are initiating in lakes like Lake Superior, and you do see that sort of movement happening to the other lakes. There's always an opportunity, and I think we're getting better in terms of making those connections. I haven't seen that slide of all the lake priorities together. I had to make that slide, but I think there is definitely an interest to make that happen. And I think we have the mechanisms through the water quality agreement and the science annex to be getting better and better at that. How low do you go for the lower trophic food web survey? It is yeah, maybe Mike will answer that when he's staring at me. What's the lowest that we go? Someone can answer this. It's zooplankton and diabaria and mysis. How low does that survey go?
Maybe I should rephrase that. Is anybody looking at rates of sedimentation and detrital depositing and turnover? Anybody?
No.
The question was, is anyone looking at rates of sedimentation and turnover? I can't answer that question.
Tom, the answer is no.
Okay.
Not currently.
The answer is no. I'm just repeating for the folks online.
No, functionally it's been 63 microns in the water column.
Yeah, so the nearshore framework is already an approved approach to analyzing and reporting on the nearshore. The assessment is underway. It's being done a little bit differently in Canada and the US. The Canadian assessment has been completed for Lake Erie, well underway for Lake Ontario, and it's moving to the other lakes under that time frame. And the idea is to repeat that every 5 years for each lake, and that gets incorporated into the land. In the US, it's the National Coastal Conditions Assessments being used as the corresponding approach.
So the reporting mechanism is the land?
Yes, they will be included in the land when the results are available.
So to your point at the beginning of this, which is sort of not everything can be a priority, to some extent maybe that's on the way that we've presented the information over the years. And one thing that we've done routinely is that we have combined our routine monitoring surveys, which provide that important base for collaboration that we just talked about. We've combined that with our priorities. And so it looks a little odd because we have these priorities that look like annual monitoring. And that's always, there's been tension around that, right? And maybe this is a chance to sort of rethink how we talk about those things. You have up there identified potential science and monitoring priorities, but underlying that are these existing resources. And so the priority isn't the survey, it's the new information in the CSMI year. But perhaps too often we've just sort of relied on talking about the resource rather than the knowledge. And so maybe that's something we can do better at this meeting, is sort of try to draw a line between the thing we do every year, invasive species, oil detection, lake sturgeon survey, though recognizing that the CSMI is an expanded sturgeon index, so on. But try to make a very clear distinction between the ongoing and what's different. That might help with that issue.
Thanks, that's a good comment. The comment was, we have an opportunity for us to maybe improve our way in terms of articulating priorities and how that relates to some of our ongoing work.